instrumental value, apparently, to everybody in the world, although I would dispute that. But now, increasingly, what we're seeing in a lot of the justifications for these kinds of attacks or closures is that programs like these have no viable plans for improvement. That is, they're not gathering evidence of ensuring the good educational practices and value that they are promulgating, and therefore they become extremely easy targets. And there's a justification for why they should be put on that list of likely closures. And that might not be something that is particularly immediate or even of interest at institutions like Georgetown and Notre Dame. But I think it is something that we should be paying attention to. It's indicative of the state of affairs in our disciplines, and it should worry us. It means that languages and humanities are not being valued at many institutions in the United States. And that has all kinds of implications for us in terms of our students, in terms of our disciplines and where they're going, and in terms of sort of our role in the future of higher education. So I think we need to pay attention to these kinds of trends as we move ahead, even if they're not immediately impacting us locally. A second then and related concern that I have has to do with external forces that shape our future in higher education. And that has to do with, in a modern culture about accountability, how are the assessments that we're engaging in stacking up? So while some of these programs may not be engaging in assessment, some of us are, and some of us are doing quite a good job of it, I think. The question then becomes, is that enough? Are we doing the right things to sort of increase the value, increase the apparent or perceived value of our programs, make sure that we're sustained and even expanded and so on. And I just want to share with you here something of a perception from the national level, that is from the Department of Education at the federal level, who are in the end the ones that end up driving the whole accreditation mandates and processes that the local regional accreditors engage in, and that washes down eventually onto us in the form of a mandate to engage in outcomes assessment. And it seems that despite the change in the White House, despite the change in the administration, we've actually seen an intensified rhetoric from the Department of Education recently, and commentaries that suggest that the kinds of assessment that we're engaging in locally are idiosyncratic, not linked to institutional goals, that we engage in measurement for the pure sake of measurement, just to get it off our backs or out of the way, that what we do is not understandable to outsiders or the public, that there's no consensus or articulation within the disciplines about assessment or about our outcomes or our values, and so on and so forth. And what this suggests to me, on the one hand, is that there are expectations from the outside for assessment that maybe we haven't been responding to in a convincing way, and we need to be paying attention to. That doesn't mean that their concerns, that what it is that they're talking about in terms of assessment is what we should be doing necessarily. But it does tell us that they're paying attention to what we're doing, and therefore we need to be thinking about what they're thinking about what we're doing. More importantly, it shouldn't just be us that are doing the thinking in the few proactive programs who are engaging in this stuff. But professionally, our professional organizations have not stepped up to the plate to stake a claim for what exactly assessment should be doing in the humanities or in language programs, what forms it should be taking, to whom it should be communicating, and so on. And the case in point for us, like for many of us, is the Monolanguage Association, and they seem to have really abdicated responsibility for assessment leadership, as far as I can tell. And that's very unfortunate, also in light of the fact that other professional organizations are not. Other professional organizations like the American Philosophical Association and the American Association for Religion have put assessment at the forefront of their national agendas. And they are responding to these things in ways that are meaningful to their disciplines, honest about their values, but at the same time responding to this national mandate. And so that troubles me considerably, and I think in the end it's going to be up to us acting locally, but then expanding beyond our local circumstances to deal with that, especially when our professional organizations are not going to. So where does that lead us? Well, some of us, like many of you here already, are doing important and highly meaningful assessment work already, and that's great. But I think, nationally speaking, or across the board, not enough of us are taking it seriously, and that is also compounded by this lack of a coordinated response at the disciplinary level within humanities and languages. Therefore, we're left with a real possibility that our efforts are going to be countermanded or overwhelmed by accountability mandates that ignore what kinds of assessment might really work and make a difference and be of value in the humanities, which is fundamentally what I'm after, and I think what all of us would be in support of. So that's the bad part, and that's the kind of, things that worry me at night part of the talk. So what do we do about it? Here's a modest proposal then for making the most of assessment given this current milieu. I think what's needed, and what we might want to do in response to these kinds of challenges is, first of all, keep the big picture in mind as we work on our local assessment efforts, especially at places like Notre Dame and Georgetown, because people will pay attention to what you do, and there are lots of possibilities here then for shaping a meaningful response to these kinds of issues, not only for your own local purposes at the forefront, but also with some kind of a national or external dimension by way of leadership within humanities and language disciplines. The modest proposal then. First of all, I think we need to understand the accreditation impetus, get our heads around that, and respond in reasonable ways. First, that involves, of course, understanding that there is one, a mandate. Not that it should drive what we do, but acknowledging that it is what many people think of in the first instance in higher education in terms of assessment. So the things that the accreditors are asking for, the ways that they're asking, the ways that the institutional administration is translating that, are the ways that assessment is perceived. We need to, I think, in our local projects, strive to model useful actions that can meet accreditation needs, but more importantly, can demonstrate how the process is beneficial to our disciplines, to our students, to our programs locally. Specifically then, in terms of responding to accreditation impetuses, most basically what is meant there is that we should be thinking and acting programmatically in higher education, and that's the sort of fundamental reason for the whole movement towards outcomes assessment and educational effectiveness in the accreditation process. It's that we haven't traditionally acted very programmatically. We've acted idiosyncratically by and large. So that means that what we do in our courses is related to what others do in other courses, to degree programs, to institutional missions and goals, and all of that fundamentally should be about fostering student learning in valued directions. Within this programmatic mindset, assuming we're adopting that, then we should be envisioning assessment opportunities, or a series of opportunities, for better understanding the relationship between what we do and what students learn, on the one hand, but also for communicating that relationship to a variety of distinct audiences. It's not just about engaging in assessment for our own benefit, but I think it's also about utilizing assessment to communicate to different audiences for different purposes. Once we envision assessment as a series of opportunities, then, well, we need to actually do some assessment, not just talk about it. And that means, I think, collecting information that's going to be meaningful to our program and is going to be meaningful in communicating strategically to the people we need to communicate with. And that includes students, and that includes faculty, but it also includes other people in the institution and people in our disciplines beyond the institution. What is not meant here, then, is trying to do everything at once, and I want to stress that point. Often we are sort of pushed into engaging in assessing all variety of student learning outcomes all at once every year and writing a big report about it. And then we don't find that, after many years of experience, to be a particularly conducive way of engaging in assessment that's useful. And so one thing that we try to stress, of course, is to do all of this stuff iteratively and cyclically in a way that prioritizes important questions at one point in time to be answered about outcomes within feasible timeframes that respect the reality that some of these things are very long-term. Think about language development, for example. But that also do lead to some kind of action being taken. So we want to make sure we close that loop about acting on assessment as well. And finally, ultimately, I also think we need to be communicating strategically about this whole endeavor to local audiences, for sure, but also beyond, such that we begin to alter this status quo that I was talking about before, which is increasingly debilitative for the humanities in particular. If we let the status quo carry on, we're going to see more programs being closed down, we're going to see the disciplines disappearing, and that's, I think, urgent right now in our area. So let me then just finish. I was given 15 minutes, so I'm on time doing that. Let me finish by emphasizing that there is also considerable reason for optimism. We have already had